Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Peggy Smedley Show. I'm your host, Peggy Smedley. Today, I'm joined by a leader from one of manufacturing's rare century-long success stories, Graco Manufacturing, now celebrating 100 years. From two founders in a garage to a global innovator, the company has balanced discipline with evolving its technology, its workforce, and now its connected IoT-enabled equipment. As manufacturers face talent shortages, automation pressures, and the rise of a fully connected operations, Graco is shaping what is the next generation of smart manufacturing actually looks like. Here to talk all about that journey, the inflection points, the culture, and the future, I'm joined by Angie Wordell, who is the Executive Vice President of Chief Operations of Supply Chain at Graco. Angie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Peggy, for having me.
So, Angie, these are exciting times to be in manufacturing. Exciting, difficult, lots of different things to talk about. But you, for your company right now, reaching 100 years is truly a milestone, a really big achievement, I think, in manufacturing in general. We hear all the negative side in many ways, shortages, we're all fearing AI, taking our jobs. But what has enabled Graco to achieve the longevity?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but I think at the core of it is really our philosophy of really trying to stay close to customers, really making sure that we're trying to really help solve their real world problems. It's not just about a product line, but it's about how the products and our services can actually help solve those problems for customers, which kind of keeps us innovating, getting out there, making sure that we're moving to the next level. Things are changing, not staying stagnant, but really making sure that we can support that. And for me, as manufacturing in my operations role, it's keeping up to speed on that, making sure that we can really stay attuned to what's needed and to continue to grow. Again, 100 years is a long time and a lot changes over that time. And I've been with the company for 33 years. And even in my time, it's dramatically how much things have changed over the years and how you really have to stay on top of it to really make sure that you're satisfying that need.
So I'm going to tell you, for every woman, every employee out there listening, 33 years is a mighty long time, one, to be with a company, one, to be a woman, one, to be an inspiration, let alone an aspiration for what you're describing right now. So first of all, you have two founders in a garage. That's inspirational in and of itself. But how do you tell people that you've been with the company? You don't see that today. People saying, I'm going to job hop. I'm going to go. I'm going to get bored. It's dirty. It's dingy. It's all these other things. But let's talk first about starting this company by two founders. But let's talk about the discipline, not only of what they did, but you yourself to stay with the company that many years. And then I'm going to get to, we have many questions for you, but how you stayed with it as a woman to be able to move up the ranks and to be able to stand strong when many people say women aren't in industry and to be an executive. That says something about you, the founders, the industry, many things.
I'll start with kind of our founders. Like I said, really, this is an older company. They started with innovation at the core of what they did, trying to solve the problem. And I think they really founded around the whole manufacturing process of having reliability, having safe equipment, making sure that we're leading with new technology, doing something different. And I think that's what they did as new kind of founders. We've carried throughout the whole process. And even with my time at Graco, it's looking to say, how can we evolve? How can we continue to develop? How can we innovate? And how can we keep changing things? I think if we wouldn't have done that, the company would have gotten old and would have stayed small and we wouldn't have grown. And I think having that process in place, that really disciplined process to really be creative and also to make sure that we're really grounded in our values with reinvesting in the company has been really important to me. And especially when I joined the company, again, the best thing I had was any new person starting, you're not sure if you're going to stay there for very long. You want to make it 5 years. That was my goal. But the company had something where it was able to keep learning. We kept investing in the company. We kept investing in technology. As an engineer, was super exciting. You got to see new stuff being implemented. You got to get your ideas come to life. And I think we've evolved, and that's what's helped really create the company's culture to make sure that we continue that across all of our disciplines within the company, making sure that we continue to grow. And to grow means to grow with the customer, to help them, support them in the long term. But internally, it really helps us internally grow too, because we're not stagnant and we can keep pushing forward and be creative within our own job positions.
You just talked about a couple really important things. You talked about the idea of the management having the idea of being innovative. That
Mhm.
innovation leads to the idea of having good people who want to grow with the company and looking back. So I guess the question then, what were some of those most pivotal inflection points that led to the company being able to grow for the customer's sake? Because it doesn't matter if the company has ideas, but if it doesn't serve the customer at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how wonderful you are because the customer's always right.
Yep. So again, it goes back to this solving problems. And part of the pivotal moments have been as we've done different things. Electrification was a pivotal moment. We went from air technology, hydraulics, and now to electrification and now digitization. So again, we're trying to make sure that we're staying on tune with some of the changing technologies that will help support the customers long term. Because again, you got to support them. And as things change, the equipment has to make sure that it's also supporting all those processes and all those benefits to make sure that we can actually get the value. Again, providing value to a customer is really in the end what we need to do. If it's just moving something from one spot to another and that's not a valuable fluid or material or some type of process they need to move, we want to make sure it's value add and our equipment can really do that value add. So again, back to changing the technology, I think digitization is now the newest one. Those connected devices, the AI, all that stuff packaged with electrification has really been key as far as us pivoting more in the recent years to the new technology and growth.
The interesting part of hearing you talk about pivoting with digitization, think about all the things when you started with the idea of going from SCADA, from doing all these things in automation and trying to look at all of these things that have happened. What fascinates me most about this is the idea of making that transition. Everybody panics from decade to decade about how much is this going to displace. So
Yep.
when we look at automation, we say, how is that displacing the generation before or whatever might happen? So we looked at M to M, started with SCADA, then M to M, then we talked about IoT, now we're talking about digitization, all of these things that continue to concern people and now manufacturers. How has Graco right now managed all of this over the last century? Because it seems more and more we have more of these shortages with workers, but yet you've used technology to help you be more successful.
Yep. Actually, I think the technology transformation is super interesting because there is a fear that initially you're going to lose your job because the technology has come in. And we've done, I would say, things to make sure to reinforce that technology isn't necessarily replacing a person. It might be replacing a task that allows that person to do something else. Our benefit that we've had through automation, through the IoT, those things have all supported operators, and we've done a pace where that they can actually understand the technology and they agree with it. It usually helps them out. It does things that people don't want to do. And I think that's the message that we want to make sure our employees know is that some of this technology can help facilitate. It helps with ergonomics. It helps with safety. It helps with mundane tasks. It helps with making sure that you can speed up your decision making. And as we show that to them, they're seeing the benefits. And it's allowing us, because of the shortage, as we grow, not to have to add as many people. And I think that's been our biggest benefit. And we've done it at a pace that's allowed us to do that without actually eliminating jobs in the short term, but it helps us reduce the jobs in the long term. That actually makes our employees more capable of the jobs they're actually doing today, uses their skill sets a little bit more well-rounded, and gets rid of some of the safety, like I said, the safety, the ergonomics, some of those issues that can come up.
How's it doing with employee retention? When you look at that, you might not have to increase your employees, but how does it help you with retaining the ones that you really want to retain
Yeah.
or need to retain? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah, so I get feedback from a lot of our factory people, even the engineers and planners within our factory, because it's so modern, we have a lot of new technology. It actually empowers them more, and they actually like working here better. We have very clean, it makes it very clean. There's a lot of companies that still maybe are dingy. And I think the attitude is that manufacturing is dirty, it's hard, but when you look at our factories, they're very modern, they're well lit, they're bright, they're really good work environments. And when they come in, it's like they're really doing some very specific tasks that is actually fun. They're working with robots, they're doing programming, they're doing assembly assist. they're doing stuff that actually it makes their lives better. And I think they've been embracing it. So it has actually helped us with some retention, especially on some key technology jobs.
So let's talk about your environment. How do you advise customers? I guess maybe that's the better question first we should start with, and your teams to balance automation with the human expertise, since you're dealing with robots and you sit there and say, because there's a balance, you've got to say humans working with robots and feeling like they're partners side by side. And then there's that, how do I feel comfortable? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we do that when we talk with our customers, we talk with our employees, with customers, with this technology we have embedded into our own equipment. It's understanding that it can help make the job safer. It can help make it more efficient. Again, using that technology to have the systems help manage some of the process, manage the materials flow, manage to make sure that the equipment's running properly, safely, but really make sure that it eliminates some of that extra burden that they would have to do and actually puts it so that they can just get notified. It makes it smarter. So that, again, it can help you get your jobs done faster, whether it's a customer or whether it's in our factory. It helps you make sometimes better decisions so you can get there quicker instead of having to do the manual kind of day-to-day work or that analytics that would have to be happen if you didn't have that smart technology or that automation that is assisting you in doing some of those things. So we really like to use it as it's really assisting you to make a better decision. It does all the hard work, and then at the end point, you can make the decision to do the right thing.
We've come to this point of understanding, despite the pros and cons, when we start looking at robots, whatever it might be, and AI, however we're at that point in a juncture in our business, we have to understand the safety. You talked about that from the very beginning. What are those guardrails? Whether we've already left that point where we're going to be down the road, where do you think we need to be as a society then of understanding that from a safety perspective, from a business perspective, from a labor perspective? As a company now that's reached that milestone of 100 years, do you think that you are looking ahead to understanding that as well?
Yeah, I think, with the safety aspect of it, or if you think of governance of it, but I think it's always going to be top of mind for us. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where we're not thinking about the safety aspect of using this type of automation, digitization, the AI tools, and even with our products, making sure that we understand like how we can improve that safety going forward, because it is always a big concern. The human person is the one we want to make sure that we protect. And then with that, it's also safety, I would say, making sure that you have really good governance around some of the digitalization as well. It's not just about protecting a physical safety, but it's the safety of the whole data source. It's the safety of the whole enterprise, making sure that you have good aspects around that safety protocol.
And that's really a very good point, because sometimes we don't necessarily recognize all the transformation that we've gone through, and that digitization exposes lots of things, and it's not necessarily one way or another. So looking at the biggest challenges you've just described and opportunities, you see the next generation of manufacturing, and we could talk, I want to dig a little deeper into the IoT focus in a minute. What do you think have been for manufacturing companies? And we can also talk about the supply chain, because you're involved in so many things right now. But when you look at both the challenges and opportunities for manufacturing and collaboration, there seems to be a lot of moving parts right now happening. Do you find yourself seeing that you've got to keep your eye on many things, and manufacturers really need to do that right now?
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in the world, and a lot of it actually in manufacturing, but a lot of it has to do with the supply chain and the global, I would say, economies and how they're working today. You always think about, that our generation has it so much worse than the last generation. And it's always things are harder now than they were, so much easier. But it's different, right? And I think for manufacturers, understanding the true global supply chain, especially if you're a global manufacturer like Graco is, understanding that and making sure that you can be as responsive as you need to be to meet the customer's needs is probably one of the most critical things that we're really focused on, which is really challenging. Customers' expectations of delivery times. Amazon has totally changed delivery expectations around the world. The global economies of in country, for country, there's a lot more protectionism going on. So really understanding where you need to make things, how you need to sell things, how do you make sure you stay close to customers. As a manufacturing supply chain person, it's really important for me to understand what those needs are so that I can actually make sure that our teams can support that through our commercial leaders and that we can actually meet the customer needs. So it's really this whole globalization and challenge to make sure that we can be responsive, which also means we need to understand where we're sourcing, where we're distributing, and where we're making things. And with that, keeping on top of technology. It's ever evolving, and we got to make sure that we can continue to hit all of our metrics. We're a manufacturing company. We want to be around for another 100 years. And to do that, we have to be really disciplined in our organization and how we function. Safety, quality, delivery, cost are our 4 key areas. So making sure that we really hit those hard is what we really need to do.
When you talk about safety, quality, costs,
Delivery cost.
Delivery, there you go. All of those things that you mentioned there. And then talking about protectionism and globalization, there's a lot to unpack there that you just described. And I think the reason that it's almost hard to imagine when we think just a few years ago, our biggest thing was trying to understand where toilet paper was coming from.
Yeah.
And nobody even understood supply chain until we thought about toilet paper. But now when we think about it from a sustainability, a resilience perspective, you just described a protectionism and the way people are thinking. That's got to be a lot to manage. And from your, not only from you, but everybody in your team that has to understand it, because not everybody thinks the same way you do.
Yep. And I think that, and the benefit of COVID was really people understanding supply chain a little bit better. I don't think they fully understand it, but it's a little bit better. But yeah, it's really getting the whole organization to understand what do we need to do. We're not going to pick up and move things around just to move them, but we have to be very logical about how we're thinking about the global supply chain to make the right decisions for our current products and customers, as well as for our future products and customers as we grow. And just making sure that we're really diligent and deliberate about how we move forward with those decisions.
And I think the other thing you said is Amazon. Amazon has changed the game because the average consumer, when I was young, would never have thought, and I've said this many times on my show before, never would have thought about getting McDonald's delivered to my home. And today, that's the way the average consumer thinks nothing of it. They're like, yeah, that's the way of life. It's just the way it is. But that just shows you the instantaneous way people think. So that means you as a manufacturer yourself have to think the same way and have to think about goods in your plant that you have, the products that you have, just-in-time delivery has changed. Everything else that you're thinking about of the way you have to have what kind of sourcing of the right pieces of equipment that you have to deliver for your customers, to deliver the product out the door. Every types of OEM type of thing that you have to make that happen. All of those parts and pieces and everything that you're delivering and managing is one of those, again, nobody thought about the supply chain till, I don't say nobody, you get my point about COVID, but that now is changed the game to the way we think and the way we respond, because the consumer is unforgiving in a lot of ways, at least the average consumer, everyday consumer.
Yeah, it totally has changed. And I think most companies nowadays are thinking about how do we best service the different customers. And different customers have different needs, but there's different expectations that continue to evolve as we get through this. And it's just making sure that you can be responsive and we can adjust as the times adjust. And I think that's being flexible, making sure that you're not stuck in a certain mindset, that you actually accept the flexibility that's needed is probably the biggest thing that we have that we want to do. It's just making sure that we can be flexible going forward to provide that service as things change, because it will still change again too. Things will continue to change. So we just got to make sure we're ready.
That's a really good point, because one of the things we all talked about a few decades ago was M2M gave us the insights to connect things. But what we didn't have was what we needed was the IoT to actually fully, we have the data from M2M. IoT gave us the ability to finally connect those things so we could see the data. Now that real-time changing thing. Now, talk to us about, now you have AI giving you the ability to do even more. So how has Graco actually integrated IoT connectivity into its equipment? And it's enabling you to do things that when you think back 100 years ago, when they were first starting out, it was a little different, and how real-time data is changing the way things are enabling. And we'll go back to the supply chain, that whole thought of it, the way your customers operate and maintain their systems. Because again, it's that collaboration, your ability no longer siloed, We always had everything was siloed, and it was an entirely different world in manufacturing because you couldn't see things the way you wanted to. Now you can actually make real-time decisions unlike ever before.
Yep. Yeah, and exactly. Not all of our products, but a lot of our products have that technology built in. And I think so some of the benefits are is again, it's how do we make our products to provide the best support that they need. So example would be is someone is spraying up 2 stories and there needs to be an adjustment because the paint is getting low in the pail. So the system is smart enough to know that. So it self-adjusts versus having a person come down, make an adjustment on the equipment below, and now they can keep spraying. Things like that, whether you're in a factory as well, there's different applications where as it's running autonomous, maybe a drum unloader is unloading. And again, as it gets lower, it self-adjusts to make sure that it has the needs set correctly, again, to provide that smart technology. So I think where we can put that information, that digital information, so they can actually do some of those things to make people more efficient, to get better use of our materials, to reduce cost, and actually making sure that we can make sure we use the materials better so we can actually just be more environmentally friendly to get rid of most of that waste. All those things help us, but that smart technology is what helps drive it to a level and not having a person have to interact all the time to try and get that efficiency.
I look at that again as such a huge safety
Yep.
factor as well. That instead of them having to come down and look at it, that they're being
Yep.
notified that things
Yep.
are happening. I just look at that as, wow, you just saved. Right away, I instantly see
Yep.
that. How does some of the other things that you have, factories run mixed fleets and legacy and modern equipment, how do you play all of those or factor all of that in together? And how do you ensure connected solutions that way and integrate with existing systems, platforms, standards? There's got to be a lot of things from the shop floor that come together. Is there? How does that all work?
Yeah, I think we'll always be fighting that older technology with newer technology. And sometimes they just don't play well together. And you have to be aware of where the
Right.
deficiencies are, right? It's just going to be a deficiency. But I do think whether it's in our equipment or whether it's in our factories, again, some of this stuff where they do have connections across where you can upgrade certain portions of machine to connect older equipment. We've done upgrades for that as well. But again, I think some of it's just understanding what's the best return on investment. And again, whether it's our customer or it's ourselves, knowing when that return on investment by having that new technology to allow you to get that efficiency, it really pays for itself to make sure that you can upgrade and do those things because you'll get your return on your money back.
So I started this conversation out being really impressed that and I'm sure everybody says, they probably ask you this question, but I really wanted to really get to you as a woman in a very male dominated industry. And it's gotten better, but we lost some ground during COVID. A lot of women
Yep.
left because they had to go back. And now you're still doing this incredible job. But I think it's important because I think it's
Yep.
always important to inspire whatever future generation of work to think that manufacturing isn't this dark, dirty, dingy industry. But I think it's also important to encourage women to think, whether in engineering, whatever role, that especially manufacturing is really a cool industry to be in. Talk about it and why you've been, besides that you've enjoyed this company, but
Mhm.
why it's such a great career for those who have families or in future of work just in general.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of reasons, or actually, there's probably a lot of reasons, but I'll highlight a couple of them. One, I think manufacturing in general, it's actually a really strong, stable company that you can join. Usually, there is a lot of different types of roles that you can play, whether it's from engineering, design, manufacturing, industrial electrical, to marketing, to finance, there's to even human resources, legal, there's all kinds of roles. So I think the one thing people don't think about is they think manufacturing, oh, it's the factory floor. Yes, you can be an assembler, you can be a machinist, you can be a welder, but there are all kinds of other types of roles that you can go to college for and you can work in a manufacturing company and have a great career. So I think one aspect is just knowing all the roles. I think the other thing that for me that really stuck with it is that honestly, having diversity within manufacturing, especially as you have a lot of people, like when I joined, I was an engineer, I worked with assemblers, machinists, I grew into management role. And having diversity of backgrounds with men and women in manufacturing management roles was really key because it brings a different diversity to the group and different perspectives. And to me, it was really empowering to be somebody who had different thoughts that I can bring different ideas to it. Sometimes we had the same thoughts, but again, you bring a different perspective that you can bring to it. I think was really good for me. And I think lastly, there's lots of opportunity for movement. Again, you can go be an engineer, being a manager, stay an engineer, go to marketing. I think that there's a plethora of ways to move around a company. I've had the benefit of moving around to different roles as well as different locations, which made me feel like I moved companies without moving companies. And that was probably one of the biggest benefits for me to stay with Graco is that it continued to grow and I continue to have opportunities to move around, which was great for me.
So, piece of advice, that was wonderful. I appreciate you giving that. For those listening, the next 100 years, I think Graco's done a wonderful job. For those who say, I want to be able to, I don't know what the career is going to be. I don't know what the titles are going to be. AI is changing everything. I don't know what I should go to school for. What advice would you give them? You describe what manufacturing is, but still someone would say, yeah, but she could say that, but I don't really know what I should go to school for. What would you tell them based on what you're describing, what you're doing right now, what you are seeing right now?
Yep. I think figure out what you want. If you want to be shop floor operator, assembler, machinist, or in the office type staff, but find something that, within the different areas that you really like, supply chain, operations, engineering. And my thing is that just making sure that you're open to really driving for innovation, you're open to change, and you want to make improvements. Because I do think manufacturing is going to be a pillar for making sure it continuously improves, continuously evolves, but it's going to have the fundamentals. We're still going to make things in manufacturing. We still need supply chain people. We still need engineers to design and make it. We still need financial people to help us with the numbers. We still need the basic fundamentals of those positions and people, but we need people to evolve and use the technology that's going to be in front of them. We're not going to be like probably the first 50 years was more similar. The last 20 years, we've evolved a lot. So I think it's going to continue to evolve more as we go forward. So just being open and willing to learn new technologies and be willing to change.
The speed of change has been remarkable, a little so fast. We've never seen it, what it was like in the Industrial Revolution. Probably won't be as calm in the next 50 as we've seen it, but it's been an interesting time. But I think your advice is a good one because we don't know what change is going to be, but be willing to experience it. And we're going to need these roles. We still have to make, build, and grow things. And I think you're 100% correct. So Angie Wordell, we appreciate your time, Executive VP and Chief Operations and Supply Chain at Graco. Thank you so much. Where can our listeners go to get more information and learn about all the amazing things we talked about today?
Yeah, they can go to www.graco.com.
Thank you again for all the time today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, listeners, that is all the time we have for the show today. Make sure to subscribe to our episodes each week. Share your thoughts with me on X at Connected World, or follow us on LinkedIn or YouTube and continue the conversation there. Please check out our website at connectedworld.com or our show website at thepeggysmedleyshow.com. Remember, we broadcast live every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Central, and our podcasts get posted every Thursday. This is the Peggy Smedley Show, your voice for our connected world. And remember, with great technology comes great responsibility.